like I look like I'm about to churn butter or make some milk. I'm just going to be doing my wrap up. So I'm going to be starting with books that I own physically because I actually didn't read anything physically this month. I had 22 books this month, I think, but I didn't read anything physically. I listened to everything like ebook or audiobook. I did not pick up a single physical book, but I'm just going to talk about the books that I actually do own. The first book I want to talk about is let's talk about Tools of Engagement. I gave Tools of Engagement 4 out of 5 stars. This is the third book in the Hot and Hammered series by Tessa Bailey. I enjoyed this book a lot. So this book follows the main character Bethany and Wes. Bethany is the sister of the main character in Fix Her Up, which is the first book in this series, and Wes works at the construction site with Bethany's brother. So in the second book, Love Her or Lose Her, you see them meet and they start off on the wrong foot because Wes literally tried to pick her up in front of her brother and she's like, ew, no. And so they kind of start off on the wrong foot. So this book follows it, and there's some other things that happen in Love Her or Lose Her. I personally think that you should read all of them because I think they're good, but you can read them out of order, you can skip them, whatever. I don't care what you do with your personal life. So I really enjoyed this book. They have like this enemies to lovers thing going on, but something about this book just wasn't a full 5-star for me. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the audiobook. I did not like the audiobook. I don't know what it. Book follows them and they're like enemies to lovers thing going on, and she is going to be put on this reality TV show where they are basically fixing up this house, and she chooses Wes to work with him because her brother is like her competition. And I just think that this family is so funny, and I'm so glad that we got more books of this family because I just think that they're so entertaining. But I really enjoyed this book. It was just the audiobook, and they weren't something about enemies to lovers. Like, I love enemies to lovers, but you have to be done perfectly for me to give it a 5 stars. They never had a real reason to be enemies. Like, he wasn't even her enemy. He was just flirting with her and she just didn't like it. Like, it didn't make her uncomfortable, but she just didn't like it because he worked with her brother, and then they didn't have a real reason to be enemies, basically. So it's not even enemies to lovers. I would say hate to love, but only one side hate. Unrequited love? No. Great banter though. The next books I read are series, and that is The Hunter and the Villain. I gave The Hunter 4 stars and I gave The Villain 5 stars. So The Hunter is about this playboy, and this is a dark romance. So if anybody reads this, just know that when you go into dark romance, they do read a bit corny, but they do get better, okay? Just stick to it and you'll be okay. If you go through my highlights, I read it on my Kindle, and like literally everything I said was bad, and then I remember somebody was like reading it and they were like, you were hating, like you literally hated this book, like why'd you give it 4 stars? It's dark romance, babes. This book is about Hunter, and he is a playboy. His dad owns this really big company, and he is in they live in somewhere, and so he ends up getting in this scandal, a sex tape scandal. So his dad sends him to Boston, and he has to live with this girl. Her name is Sailor, and she's like a prude, blah 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 blah, all of that, and they have to be roommates, and she does not put up with him. She doesn't like him, and he just wants to have fun. And so she is basically set to watch him, make sure he doesn't mess up, because the moment he does, his family's gonna cut him off. All poor rich boy things. This book was okay. A lot of problematic things were written in this book, but it's dark romance, so I didn't care about the main character Sailor. I don't know what it is, but when y'all read romance series, do you ever, like, that have companion novels, do you ever read the first book and you don't care about the main character, and then you read the second book that follows like a friend, so the main character from the first book is in it, and then she's just less important to you and like more annoying? It feels like I was forced to read about this character and I do not care about her, and then when I read about her from somebody else's perspective in the second book, I hated her. Even though she wasn't painted to be a bad character, I just hated her. Yeah, I didn't have a real reason to, but I do. Do I need a reason? No. And so then there's the villain. So the villain follows the brother of Hunter, and he is the CEO of the family company. He is like the heir of this company. In this book, you end up finding out that Hunter is He's already married and he's having a baby, and if he has a baby, if this baby's a son, this son is going to be the heir of the company. And so Killian sets out to marry Persephone, which is a friend of Hunter. Killian is very much a lone boy. I don't believe in love kind of guy. So he doesn't really consider her their friend. But he sets out to marry her, and a marriage of convenience, and she will bury his kids. She will bear his children, and he will give her money and the finest things in the world. And to be honest, if a man came up to me with that deal, I would say yes in a heartbeat. I'm not gonna lie. There is Foundracide, which I am so sad I didn't like this book. I just thought that this book was so boring. Okay, so this book is basically about this girl, and well, actually they live in this world, and the magic system in this world is so interesting. Everything's basically about, it's not about coding, but basically it's about, I forget what they call it, but it's a kind of magic where, like, if I were to see a rock, I could, with the magic, I could trick the rock into being sand, or like thinking it's sand, so being lighter. And so she has a special power where she can touch things and not hear them, but kind of, they don't speak to her, but like, say she is, one scene she's like running from the police and she touches the ground and she could tell how many police were on the ground and where they were. Or if she's picking a lock, the lock will tell her how to be picked. And so she comes across this key, and this key is actually speaking to her. So she's like, what the hell? And it turns out that she was on this mission to get this key, by the way, which is why she was running from the police. And it turns out that this key is like, it turns out that this key is really important, and a lot of people wanted their hands on this key. So now she's torn between giving this key to these people, or keeping it for herself, or doing something else with it. And I was liking it at first. The key was like my favorite character though. It wasn't that interesting. I was so bored. There was nothing going on. There was a lot of build up, and I just wanted to love this book so bad, but I'm kind of happy I didn't, because the hardcover book was like $70, and I do not need to be spending that much money on a book. So I think it happened by luck, me not falling in love. Oh, I forgot to put on a necklace. So the last book I read, the last physical book I read was Through the Woods, and this is a graphic novel. I buddy read this with Mika. Who else is happy that me and Mika buddy read a book, because we don't really buddy read books that often. We said we'll buddy read a book and then we never get to it. This was the last book I read of 2020, and I thought it was so awesome because this was the first book Mika read of 2021, and I just thought that was really fun. This is the last book I read of 2020, and it was so good. It was so fun. This book is basically a graphic novel, and it's kind of a anthology, and it follows different people in the woods. When I first read this book, I was so confused because the first story is called Our Neighbors, and basically the father tells the daughter, if I don't come back in 3 days, then you have to go to your neighbor's house. And the father actually doesn't come back, and something happens to each of the sisters, and then the book ends off with the girl getting up. So the next book starts off at a different house. So I'm thinking, oh, she's at the neighbor's house, but I read the whole book and I was so confused. But then I figured out it was an anthology series by the time I got to the third one. My favorite stories were the first one, which is Our Neighbor's House. I really liked the introduction, His Face All Red, and the conclusion. I love the conclusion. It gave me Little Red Riding Hood vibes, and the art is just so beautiful. This book was a book I've been wanting on BookTube since I started, so the fact that I finally got it and read it. I think I also want this book in hardcover, but I'm not sure yet. But there's this page on this book that I am just so obsessed with. Like, I wish that the author would give it, like, would make another one, because this book was just so great. Oh, there's this page. This is the most beautiful page like I've ever seen in a graphic novel. And I'm just obsessed. Now on to books that I read, not physically. So I read A Deal with the Elf King, and this book was basically a Hades and Persephone retelling about elves. And I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars. It wasn't that good. Like, I really want to get into this author's books, but something about her books just don't hit for me. Like, I read another series of hers. It was a popular YA. It was like one about the librarian, and it fell flat for me. And this one wasn't bad, and I am going to be continuing on because it's going to be an anthology series, and her covers don't miss. I will be buying a hardcover because the cover was amazing, so I need this in a physical copy. So this book is basically about this main character, and she loves gardens. I love Hades and Persephone so much because I literally think that I am Persephone with my plants. And so basically this one is about this girl who like loves plants, and all she wants to do is just be with her plants all day and mood. These elves come by every year to collect their queen, and this year they come by and they pick her, and so she has to go off to marry the elf king. And the book, I started off liking the book. I think it's because I didn't read it in one sitting. I started off liking the book, and then it kind of got bored, and I kind of felt like her relationship with the elf king was just meh, and there wasn't really a plot going on in the book. I kind of felt like her relationship with the elf king could have been better, because she had a good relationship with the not the servants, but like the guy in the library, his guard, even his brother, and the relationship with her just wasn't, it was just meh. And I kind of hate when authors do that, because the same thing happened with A Curse So Dark and Lonely for me, where the author was trying to convince us that we wanted Harper and, what's this man's name, Ren, that we wanted Harper and Ren to be together, but nobody actually ended up shipping them because Ren was trying to keep his distance, but she read him to keep his distance so much to where everybody started to ship Harper and Gray, which was his guard. So I think this book is another case of that. The love interest trying to stay away from the main character, and then everyone getting bored and shipping her with somebody else because they don't really have any romance. And then I read a series, and the series is called Rich Boys of Burberry Prep. So I am very much into dark romance. As we all know, my favorite subgenre is reverse harem and bullying romances. So Rich Boys of Burberry Prep is very known in the bully romance slash reverse harem community on book Twitter. So I was like, okay, period, like I'm gonna read this, and it was good. I gave the first book 4 stars. I gave the second book 4 stars. Gave all the books 4 stars. So this book is about this girl, and she ends up getting a scholarship to this rich school. And it starts off in year 1, so they're like 13, 14. And the thing about this book is I liked it because it had so much drama, but as the books went on, it was so much drama to the fact where I'm like, okay, you could have written them in college. Like, my problem with a lot of these bully romances or reverse harem books is that they could have written these characters to be in college, because a lot of the stuff that they're doing just doesn't make sense for high schoolers. There is no reason high school should be running an underground casino. So basically this book is about this girl, and she gets a scholarship to Burberry Prep, and she walks in, she meets this girl, and she's like, hey, like, Burberry Prep is a very different school. You have different cliques of people. You have like the rich kids who like run everything, and you have literally everybody else. So they see this girl, and they're like, basically it didn't make sense why they hated her, because they paid their way in, and she got in on a scholarship, so she worked her ass off to get in there. She wrote a letter, and it ended up winning a competition, and so she worked her ass off to be in there, and people hated her because like, we paid to be here, which didn't make sense because they were already rich anyways, so it wasn't even their money, so it didn't make sense as to why they hated her. But they were bullying her, like they put her through so much. And so in the first book, there's the Boys of Burberry Prep. There's 4 of them, 3. There's 3 of them. So the book leaves off with like this big plot twist of something they did really messed up, because in the book she obviously ends up falling in love with them, and they end up becoming friends, and they stop bullying her and all this stuff. And there's this huge plot twist that happens at the end of the book. And so the way that the author writes this is, you know the plot twist at the beginning of the book, but then how you get there is so interesting, and you don't know the full plot twist. You get like a little picture of it. So each book started off with a part of the plot twist, and then the rest of the book is how you get there. And I really just thought that was so interesting, and I just thought these books were so fun. But then I was really good with like reading series this month, which, I mean, I'm actually really good at reading romance series. It's reading fantasy series that is my issue. So I read Born in Mafia Blood. So I read 1, 2, 3, 4. And this series is Bound by Honor, Bound by Duty, Bound by Hatred, and Bound by Temptation. I rated Bound by Honor 4 stars, Bound by Duty 3 stars, Bound by Hatred 4 stars, and Bound by Temptation 3 stars. So this book is about this mafia, and they take place in Chicago, and the main character at a young age finds out that she has to marry the guy that's in his mafia. He's like the highest guy in he's going to be the highest guy in the mafia once his father either passed away or passes it down to him. And so she knows that she has to marry him. So the day comes when she finds to marry him, and it is an arranged marriage kind of story. And I really thought this book was so interesting. because like women basically have to do whatever their man tells them to do. Like they have to be stay-at-home moms, cook, clean, all this stuff, and like they literally just expected to like sit around and make kids all day. And they're also arranged to marry people that they aren't in love with, and I think that really sucks. But it's basically just about politics and how politics and how men basically control everything, and why you shouldn't leave men in control of shit because they actually don't know what they're doing. Yeah, so this book follows the character Arya, and then in this book you see she has two younger sisters, and you kind of already know who the two younger sisters are gonna get with, and she also has a younger brother, and I loved him. And it just sucked because it shows how, like, in this book series at least, how the mafia in this book series ruined the men, because she has a little brother named Romeo. He was so sweet and so soft, and he was always hugging his sisters and always looking at his sisters after his sisters, and his dad hated it. And then as he growing up, you kind of see him become a little shit. And so then the next book, Bound by Duty, I hated that one because, so in the first book with her younger sisters, so the younger sister was set to marry the brother of the love interest in the first book, and then the youngest sister was set to marry the bodyguard, obviously. And I love that because you have that there was like forbidden love because she's supposed to marry a man in the mafia that can help her family. I hated the second book because it followed the cousin. So when I read this book, I was like, what the fuck, I want to read about the younger sister. Like, I don't give a fuck about the cousin. The cousin was mentioned once in the book. Like, who cares about her? Give me the sister. Give me the next sister. Because that's when the drama was. Because it was like hatred. Like, he wanted her so bad and she didn't want him. And then anyway, so the third book, the main guy wanted her and she didn't want him. So she runs away from her family. She runs to like Italy or some shit. Not Italy. That doesn't make sense. She runs away to her family, right? And then he ends up finding her and then bringing her back. And then her dad is like, he is fighting for her, and she's still so stubborn and doesn't want to marry him. And it makes me so mad because I'm like, girl, he just saved your life. Because their dad was a piece of shit. He was misogynistic. He was trash to his wife. He was a bad father. He was giving his daughters off to just anybody and everybody, whatever helped him out. And he only cared about himself. And he was abusive to his children. A neglective to them. He was a piece of shit. And I'm also mad that he never got what he deserved in these books. Like, come on now. And I also just never finished because I was like, it's not that it was too much for me, but I just never finished because I was just so annoyed with the dad. And then the books were very repetitive. Actually, after Bound by Temptation, I don't even know who the characters are that's mentioned, and I really don't think I care. And then I read the Addicted to You series. So I read Addicted to You, Ricochet, Addicted for Now. So if you watch my worst books of 2020, then you will know that I did not like Addicted to You. I have a love-hatred with Addicted to You, okay? They're fun to read, but there's also no plot, and the characters are basically already dating, like literally 80% of the book. But I love the characters. Like, there's a found family trope. Connor and Rose are my favorites. I love Ryke and Daisy, but Connor and Rose are my favorites because they remind me of Dan and Blair from Gossip Girl. And Lily and Lo, I don't really care about, I can't lie. I just don't like Lily. It's not that I hate her, I just think she's a little dense, and I didn't like reading from her perspective. But Addicted to You series is basically, there's two different series. There's actually three, but we're not going to get into that because that would be too stressful. So there's two different series. There's Addicted to You and the Calloway Sisters. So once you read the first Addicted to You book, they will give you a reading order of every single book. So you will read Addicted to You, Ricochet, and then the Calloway Sisters. So it's really just two different series, but you have to read them intertwined because I don't even know why the author just didn't make them one series, but I kind of see why they didn't. But anyway, so Addicted to You is about Lily Calloway, and her family is really, really rich, and because they created this soda company. And then Lauren, aka Lo, and his family is really, really rich as well, and they have like this, they like produce baby stuff. And so Lily is addicted to sex and Lo is addicted to alcohol. So they grew up best friends. So they both are fake dating each other just to keep their family off of their back so they can do whatever they want in secret. And then it just follows them dating and their chaos that they get into while they're dating. But I just got bored once they started dating because I'm like, well, shit, what the fuck, what am I supposed to do for the entire book now that they're dating? Like, I just was so bored because my favorite part of the book is the chase and the banter and the build up. And then in this book you get to see Connor and Rose, like they have their banter and stuff like that. But in Kiss the Sky, which is the first Calloway sister and the fourth book you read in this series, and they were already together, so I was like, well, there's really no point in me reading. So that's why I stopped reading. I was just bored. It was fun to read and it's fun to talk about on the timeline, and I like the interactions with the characters. Like the relationship the characters have with each other is so funny, and the Found Family is so great and amazing. But all in all, I could not read the book. I read The Drowning Faith, which is the Poppy War 2.5, so you read this right after The Burning God, and you got this if you pre-order. So this book is right between the Dragon Republic and The Burning God, and you got this if you pre-ordered The Burning God. And The Drowning Faith is literally just from Naja's POV, and I love Naja. He's my favorite character in the Poppy War trilogy. Like, he is my son, my king, my everything. Like, I just adore him so much. So I gave this book 5 stars because I love Naja and it was great. So the last books I read this month were Royally Screwed and Royally Matched. These weren't the last books I read, but these are the last books I have to talk about. So Royally Screwed is about this prince, and I don't remember what happened because I started this book 2 years ago and I DNF'd it, and I cannot DNF books. I absolutely suck at them because I always feel like maybe I didn't read it right, or maybe it'll get better. So I picked this book up because I said maybe it'll get better. So I gave both of these books 3 stars. I gave Royally Screwed and Royally Matched both 3 stars. And so Royally Matched is basically just about this guy who's a prince and he is set to marry someone, and then he comes across this everyday girl, the main character, so different and so beautiful and so unique, and they spark up this relationship. And to be honest, I actually don't know because I just picked up where I left off when I stopped reading 2 years ago. So when I started reading, there's like this big plot twist that's thrown in there, and that they're forbidden to date each other and they can only date for the summer. I thought that was interesting. I only gave it 3 stars because I remember how bored I was when I first started reading. And the only reason I picked this book back up is because when I first started reading it, I hadn't gotten into smut books yet. I hadn't really gotten into romance books yet. So I feel like I put it down because it was a bit too much for me. When I went back and I was like, no, I put this down for a reason. It's just because it wasn't good. It's not that the book was bad or anything. It just was like okay. And then Royally Matched, that was pretty good. So Royally Matched was basically about the brother of the main character, and he is having this reality TV show where basically he has to find like his love. And so there is this girl on it. She's not on the show, her sister's on the show, and the girl is literally just like there all the time, and he's so intrigued by her and he's so interested by her, and they want to be together, but he has to be with these women on the show. I just thought these books were okay. Like, they weren't like the best things ever. I'm just really glad I don't own these physically because they just weren't that great. The smut scenes were pretty good, but it's just like you know. That's it for this video. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And if you've watched this far, leave a volcano emoji in the comments, and I'll see you guys in my next video.